Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another edition of Hilaal Live. Thanks for watching us on channel 347 and on our live stream, www.hilaal.tv. All too often, I do invite various people into studio and even NPOs or people from government or people from corporate. And one of the things that they have on their minds, and it's a grave concern, is mental health. So I thought, let's invite a specialist into studio, and we're going to call it Mental Health Monday. And for the next couple of weeks, inshallah, we're going to have this very special guest in studio. And I'm talking none other about clinical psychologist, Brother Rafiq Lockhat. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Thanks for inviting me.
My absolute pleasure. You come highly recommended and referred. Your work speaks volumes because you've been in our community for so many years, but also in the media industry as well, and delivering lectures and being part of various initiatives. But for those that don't know your journey, don't know the hard work that you've put in, because it is, over the years, would you like to tell us a little about your journey as a clinical psychologist?
I'll keep it short. So clinical psychologist, got into it completely by accident.
Okay.
So in my day, I matriculated in 1980,
right,
doing my age away. Was the height of apartheid, so there was no private schooling. There was nothing such as a career guidance. If you did the science course, you went to university and you did science.
Right.
Also, universities were racially segregated.
Back
so
then,
there was back then. So I lived in Pietermaritzburg.
Okay.
And you couldn't go to the university 5 minutes from you. You had to go to Durban, Westfield, or if you were colored, you had to go to Western Cape. Anyway.
UDW.
UDW, or you could apply to the Minister of Education for a permit to go to the university closest to you, and you had to give reasons to say why you can't go there. It was either a health reason or certain subjects.
Right.
And you got into the university. And nowadays it was doctor, dentist, accountant, teacher, nurse. There weren't all these.
Lawyer.
Lawyer. You go there and you see all these courses. Anyway, first year we managed to get through. Don't know what we're doing. At varsity, totally different. All the freedom, no teachers saying study. Varsity was completely new experience. There were 14 people of color that year on a campus of 4,000. And
to a large amount, you left to your own devices.
Complete something we're just not used to. Coming out of our very strict schooling system.
Your guidance counselor.
Didn't even have that.
Helped you?
No, didn't have that. And then while you're there, you're seeing what other students are studying. And then towards the end of my first year, somebody gave me a psychology textbook. Never heard of this subject. Read the book and I'm blown away.
Wow.
And I say, love this. It's so exciting. So I go to my dad. Say, here, I want to do this.
Yeah.
He said, what's that? I said, a clinical psychologist. He said, mad people. I said, no, Dad, it's not like that. But I'm now talking about the 80s.
Of course,
early 80s.
It's very different.
So he says, okay, let's go to somebody in our community, the psychologist. And of course, there is nobody.
Wow.
There's no one. There's white people, white psychologists, because it's part of that the culture, it's easy. So he said, you want to do something that nobody else is doing. We can't even find someone that we can go and talk to about it. And that's really how life started for me.
Interesting.
It was I want to be someone that nobody else is in the community.
Wow. Imagine, and one would have thought back then, even as far as the 90s, if you had 80s qualified and maybe worked into the 90s, it would be a lot more prevalent, but still nothing.
No, now it is. Now there's the Muslim psychologists everywhere, fortunately. But it wasn't like that in the 80s. I couldn't take him to anyone.
Yeah. Do you find that generation of where your dad and your mom and those generation that grew up, do you find that they a lot more understanding these days, or there's still a bit of a gap between the understanding?
It's a little bit of a gap. So Pietermaritzburg has 2 psychiatric hospitals, and what parents would do, honestly.
And it was a very common joke, Fort Napier, sorry.
Right, so what parents would do to frighten naughty kids, and my dad did that as well, is that they take you, because those days there was fences.
Sure.
And they take you to the psych hospital, to the one section where like the schizophrenic patients are, and they're hallucinating and they're not well. Right? And they'd say, see, if you don't behave, we're going to put you in there. So how people also take you to the doctor to give you an injection, and then kids develop phobias for injections. But that's what they would do. They would take a normal.
And that is how mental health was perceived.
That's how mental health
back
was
then.
perceived.
So we've progressed since.
Significantly.
You've also put in the hard work, the research, colleagues, and lectures that you've delivered as well. But if you have to describe what mental health is to someone today, in layman's terms, what are some of the information that you would pass on?
Mental health affects all aspects of our functioning. It affects our thoughts, our behaviors, our feelings. Okay, so it's not one thing. It affects all of that. And it's really our ability to manage those and to have healthy relationships and to deal with stress and to adapt to situations. So good mental health means that you're managing your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, you're dealing with stress appropriately, you're managing relationships better, and you're adapting to change.
Yeah. There's a large amount of stress or added stress that comes from different aspects of our life, be it our work environment as adults, be it our school environment as kids, be it our home environment as parents, and just community involvement as well. Do you and your practice and yourself and your advice, your treatment, do you get involved in these levels?
Yeah, all of those levels as far as possible. But then you get family, children, time commitments, and then leave it to the younger people to do the stuff you used to do a long time ago. But it's very important.
Yeah.
The dissemination of information is really important. So a show like this is really valuable. And certainly shattering myths, I think, is a really important thing.
Yeah. Before I want to move on to myths and how people see mental health. So if you look at the different communities that are described, if you could briefly, we are going to expand over the next couple of weeks, but if you would like to tell our audience, if you deal with the scholastic environment, let's deal with students, and one would think, why would students come and see a psychologist? Not so. I would imagine there are quite a few students that come to you for advice.
A lot of students come for advice.
What would be some of the key topics that they find difficult to deal with?
Obviously, exam stress, failing. And we'll talk at some time later on perhaps about how your anxiety affects your thinking.
Gotcha.
So anxiety creates certain chemical which actually affects your thinking, then you can't think properly.
Right.
Then student gets exam, you've read about it, exam panic.
Yes.
Right? They go blank.
Yes.
And these are students who've worked really hard. So these are not students who are not, these are students who've worked, they've studied, put in effort, and then they go into an exam room and there's two words they don't recognize.
Right. And it throws them off.
It just goes blank. They completely blank.
Does dyslexia fall part of an issue or a problem, or is that a separate?
But dyslexia is a specialized field.
Okay.
Usually the educational psychologists deal with that.
Gotcha.
But that's also a really important field to cover.
Right.
Because if you can't read properly, and people just think you're stupid.
Yeah.
And meantime, maybe you've got bad eyesight, or maybe you've got dyslexia, many of the other things that people have. So it is important. Good you're mentioning that.
Brilliant.
So students have exam anxiety, they have exam panic, they worry about what their parents are going to say if they fail.
Yeah.
They have breakups just before exam, which is a disaster.
Sure.
And then they're like in bed, tearful, they miss the exam. So students also go through a lot.
Right. As part of students, you have twofold that the students draw very closely to is teachers and parents. And in this entire process, they get roped into trying to help or assist and sometimes ignore the situation. Do you find any challenges or people coming to you with those types of issues?
Yeah, so sometimes there's tension between what the parent expects the teacher to do and what the teacher expects the parent to do. And so there's often this very bad communication gap between parents and teachers and expectations.
Yeah.
And then the student's stuck in the middle. The parent will say, you go to school and you do X, Y, and the teacher said, but you must go home and do your homework, or whatever it is. And so I often find that there's a mismatch in expectations.
Okay.
And so there needs to be more, I think, more communication.
And a cohesion.
Between parents and teachers.
Yeah.
Because the goal is the same.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? You want the same goal, the best for the student, get the best possible result with the least amount of stress. which of course is not possible.
Sure.
Everybody's going to get stressed, but it's really how you handle the stress.
I like that. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're also going to open up the WhatsApp line. If you'd like to communicate with us, it's Mental Health Monday. We, for the next couple of weeks, going to cover various topics. And if you find it necessary to pick our subject matter expert's brain in studio about something that you're experiencing, something that you can't quite handle, you're more than welcome to send us a WhatsApp, 079 085 2511. And Brother Rafiq Lockhat will try his level best to give you the valuable advice that you require. Join us after the break. You are still watching Hilaal Live. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Hilaal Live. Thanks for watching us on channel 347. Today is our topic, and we're calling it Mental Health Monday, where we cover various topics that's affecting our mental health as well. In the past, let's face it, it was a very taboo topic to talk about, but I think over the years, people have realized that it's so important that our mental health and our physical health has a bit of a balance. And in studio, we have clinical psychologist, Brother Rafiq Lockhat. Jazakallah so much for coming into studio and being part of this conversation and giving us valuable insight.
Oh, I'm enjoying it.
Jazakallah. So the WhatsApp line's open for our audience, 079 085 2511. If you'd like to correspond with us with regards to any type of challenge or question that you have for Brother Rafiq, you're welcome to do so, and we'll try and pose that question to him. Before the break, we spoke about various types of treatments that Brother Rafiq covers, and I'm learning so much as well. But one of the things, and I asked before the break, a little bit about some of the myths that we as our community, especially in the Muslim community, tend to see mental health very different and think about mental health, the treatment, the issues, the challenges, very, very different difficulty. What are some of the more prevalent treatments that you find dispensing these days?
The myths or the treatment?
Let's go with the myths first, and then the treatment of
sure.
it. Yeah.
So I'm very glad you asked about myths. So look, it's changing.
Right.
You heard my story about they take the children to frighten them. Not like that anymore. But there's still a pervasive thought process that if you have a mental illness, you are weak.
Right.
There's something wrong with your character.
Okay.
I don't hear people saying that if somebody gets cancer, or somebody gets pneumonia, or somebody gets bronchitis, they don't say it's weak. Why must you get cancer? You're weak. They don't say that. Right? You fall, you break your leg, it's in a plaster cast. Nobody tells you to get up and walk with your broken leg and tell you to snap out of it.
Gotcha.
So there's the first thing about that there's some character defect. No, it's not. Mental illness can hit anybody, anytime under the right circumstances. That's the first. And then the one that I commonly hear about is that it's weakness of Iman. And I think that is really unfair. Because then if you got cancer, is that a weakness of Iman too? Surely, surely not. Can't be not. Okay. Yeah. And just today, I thought about it when I knew I was coming down. I thought I'm going to share this case with you. So it's very common when people go for Hajj or Umrah, they get panic attacks just because of the amount of people and the heat. You can get a panic attack.
But just the whole experience can be overwhelming.
It can be overwhelming, but most people love it and they enjoy it. But it is that crowd. If you're claustrophobic here,
it's going to be exacerbated.
We're not used to the crowds. And one of my patients called me, and I saw him today, and he said things like that he was there in Medina, and the crowd, and had a panic attack. And one of the doctors with him said to him, "How can you do this here in front of in front of Nabi like, what's wrong with you?" And he said that made him feel really terrible because he didn't plan the panic attack. He didn't make it happen. It's uncontrollable. You get it, you can't breathe, think you're having a heart attack, you're going to die. It's not a heart attack, it's a panic attack, but it feels terrible. And unfortunately, the medical person make it worse by making him feel like he did something terrible in the masjid.
So a large amount of our how can I say, staff assisting, especially when you go on Umrah and Hajj, in your advice, should they be more knowledgeable? Should they be more opportunities for them to deal with situations like this?
I think they are generally. I think this was just an unfortunate one for him that he got a particularly judgmental person who didn't understand. But being a medical person, I thought he would have. And maybe he thought that he's helping him snap out of it.
Right.
By saying, you know, don't do this here in front of here. It's not a good place to do it.
That was not something he wanted to hear or needed to hear.
He's watching you, you know, don't do this now. So I think that wasn't helpful.
Okay.
I think it just made the person feel 10 times worse.
Right. Thank you for that example. Thank you for sharing that, because it can be a very sensitive topic, and not many people may understand, you know, what we're trying to portray in this conversation. But one of the things I want to ask is that, do you find people questioning their iman when they are going through mental health challenges?
Yes, sometimes.
Okay.
It is true. Again, I think partly we are maybe conditioned that way. And of course, listen, you must make your salahs, you must make your du'as.
Sure.
I mean, you know, if you got cancer, you don't just make dua all the time. You take the medication, and we make dua and we say, help me get better. But I find that around mental illness, some patients particularly think that there's something in terms of the iman that's lacking, and that's why they're depressed, or that's why they're having anxiety, or that's why they have a bipolar disorder, or whatever those conditions are. And I think that just exacerbates things. It just makes it a hell of a lot worse.
You know, somebody told me something lighthearted. Put a smile on my face when they said, "Oh, you know, I'm writing exams. You need to make dua, make salah. You know, you're going to do well. But if you don't study, you're also not going to do well."
I've had to have exactly the same conversation with the young man. I said, "How much studying are you doing?"
Right.
He said, "No, but I make a lot of dua."
Right.
So I said, "Listen, do you think Allah is going to send an angel to write your exams?"
Yeah.
They laughed and he said, "I was hoping."
You know, so these are the type of conversations we need to have with people as well. I've got an interest in, and I was going to lead to this, and I've got an interest in WhatsApp that comes through, and I want to cover it. Thanks, caller 7104. Thanks for your WhatsApp. It says, question, how do we deal with burnout as adults? That's a very good question.
That's a topic on its own.
Absolutely. So we can touch on it very briefly, but expand on it later. I did find when we were going through COVID, and those that were working from home especially, now it's all hybrid, but you do a lot from home now as well. I found people working longer hours in COVID, and they've sort of carried it over to now that they work in hybrid or gone back to the office as well. That type of, I want to hold on to my job, or I need to prove to my bosses that I'm worthy, that I don't get retrenched or things like that. What's your advice to that?
So the stereotypical answer is work-life balance, which is very easy to say, but incredibly difficult to actually achieve when you have bills to pay and you have responsibilities, your children, your spouse, your husband, your wife. So we must talk about it. I think that's an excellent question. We need to, I think, have like a whole session on, so how do you get the balance? Because it's really glib to say, work-life balance must come right now. It's a lot harder to actually achieve, but there are things one can do. The first thing, one must recognize burnout. We can talk about the signs another time. Recognize burnout, because you can't fix it if you don't recognize you're having it. And then you just collapse one day, and then you can't do anything. And then it takes like weeks to come right. So we'll talk about the chemicals that happen, how you end up getting burnout, why you get like so irritable, why you start snapping with people, why you have so much road rage. So these are all the signs and symptoms.
And you can't keep blaming the taxis all the time.
They really contribute
they
a
do
lot.
Contribute.
But if you're already on that stage, your road rage is very easy to snap.
Right. So to answer the caller's question as well, I mean, are there any signs one needs to look at? Because I think once somebody is going through burnout, it's difficult for you to see it, but maybe your family members, your loved ones could maybe notice there are a few signs where you probably are heading for burnout or in that process.
Excessive irritation. Everything irritates you.
All right.
You like small things, you're irritated about things. You are persistently fatigued. You are becoming very forgetful about things. You have sleep disturbance, you have appetite disturbance. You're either eating more or you're eating less.
Right.
Difficulty getting up in the morning, kind of like feeling really dread to go to work. Like, do I have to go? Yeah, I have to, I must. So sometimes it's like a toxic work environment. So there are many signs. But for me, the easiest one to find is that when somebody is persistently irritable and angry, and they're not normally like that, or they like that but a little bit.
Gotcha.
And now we've gone from a 4 to 5 out of 10 to hitting 9s and 10s all the time. So everybody has a bad day. Me, you, everybody has a bad day. We snap, we get over it. But when it's persistent, say now 12, 13, 14, 15 days, there's a problem.
Okay. All right. That's very interesting. Like you said, that's a topic on its own, and we are going to cover that in the near future as well. I want to give our audience a quick rundown in terms of the next couple of weeks. What are some of the more serious topics or more prevalent topics that we're going to cover?
So I thought that we could look at the common types of mental illnesses.
Okay.
Because I think that it's useful to know. We can't cover all of them.
Sure.
We also didn't cover all the myths today. We just covered like a few. We can look at that. I often like to give practical advice about how to deal with situations without having to see like a specialist. If we can find small things you can help yourself with. So that's what I like to talk about, some of those things. We can talk about exam anxiety. Everybody's writing matric soon. Like matric is a huge stressor, not just for the poor student, but for the parents.
Of course, yes.
Also completely panicked about, is my child going to pass? Are they going to get into like a further education institution?
Learning,
So the parents also not sure how to handle it. On the student's case, study. You can't study all the time. Your brain. So we can talk about that. You know, how do parents also sometimes make it a little worse?
Of course. And kudos to the parents that are actively involved, and, you know, going along with the journey. I'm not saying parents are not, but for those that actively, you know, get involved and ensuring that everything in their child's environment
they're
is
doing the best
well.
they can. They're trying really hard to make that environment as conducive to study as possible. You know, so that we can talk about. We can talk about how does the family handle somebody with the mental illness. Often that topic's left out.
So true.
So the person with the illness gets all the help.
Of course. Okay. Thank you so much for coming into studio. That's our time for today. Clinical psychologist, brother. It was, and we've got so much more to cover, brother Rafiq Lockhat. Absolute pleasure having you in studio. I do look forward to next Monday. Something to wake up for next Monday, and to tune in to us on Hilaal Live. Have a great evening. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
So there we go. Clinical psychologist, brother Rafiq Lockhat, joining us in studio, giving us valuable insight into the world of mental health, and we're calling it Mental Health Monday. So do join us next week, but more importantly tomorrow as well, between 5 and 6. From the Cape Town team, Sohail Barnes, Mohammed Parker, and myself, Luqman Shadrack, have a great evening. Assalamu alaikum.